Good morning. Testing, testing.
Good morning. Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I was tempted to say happy Friday, but we're nowhere near that.
Does it feel that way?
It already feels that way for me this week. It's hump day. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You ever seen that commercial?
The camel?
Yeah. Mike. Guess what day it is? Hump day. Oh, God. As you guys can see, I'm going crazy.
Jahira, you make that Dunkin' Donuts run yet?
Oh, man. Let me tell you, I'm so broke. I got to start making my coffee at home.
Yeah, me too. I got you. I got you today.
The
I got you today. I got you.
Dunkin' for me today. I actually got my cup right next to me.
Nice.
I may have to make an exception for our regular board meeting. That I'm gonna have to stop by at Dunkin'.
Yeah, I know that's right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Who do we have on? Let's see. AJ, Jahira.
And Francois.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am checking with the rest now.
I think that's Dr. Schmerling's iPhone.
Yep.
Christina, good morning. Christina, can you put up the agenda, please?
Yes.
Him. That's 1, 2, 3. Do we have quorum? I know we don't need a vote, but just want to make sure we have the majority here.
Yep, Kim just joined, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, we do.
Yeah, I'll have to sign off at 9. I have another conflict, but I can be here till then.
Yep. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to July. What's today's date? I'm completely sorry.
13.
Let's start all over. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to July 13th, Committee of a Whole. On the screen here, we have the agenda, which was distributed yesterday. I know we'll have a very robust discussion. With that being said, Superintendent, I'll turn over to you and your team to walk us through and provide your perspective and insights as it relates to these items.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. We're actually going to begin with a continuation, if you will, of the last meeting that we had on Monday. If you recall, we Chief Penn and I talked about the evolving ESSER ARP spending and talked a little bit about the underspending and the fact that, right, this is an issue that's not unique to Hartford, right? It's what many districts across the country are grappling with. How do we meet the spending goals for federal stimulus dollars? We talked about identifying ways to define return on investment, even though it doesn't really align with the true definition, the definition that we're all used to in terms of ROI, because it takes 3 to 5 years, and that spending that we have is a much shorter time frame for implementation. And so today, what we wanted to share with you is the thinking and some moves that we have made with regard to our equity innovation grants and the scaling of that as one of our strategies. So Christina, if you can take me to the next slide, which is again a reminder, which is, the stimulus funding budget is in direct alignment with our strategic operating plan, and it's focused on 4 key must-win areas. And the one that I want to, when you look at this slide here, if you see across the bottom, we have the equity innovation grants, which were just a small set aside for flexible funding dollars for schools to expand or even deepen any specific strategies or practices that they wanted to begin to scale up or to try. And then fast forward to where we are today. And based on a lot of the feedback that we heard, specifically with our school leaders, in our next slide, Christina, right, we've heard, so we have the underspend that we talked about on Monday, and we've been engaging with our school and even district leaders across our monthly administrator institutes and with our principal advisory group. And we've got a lot of feedback on ways to potentially adjust that spending, specifically around multi-tiered systems of supports, recruitment and retention, curriculum coaching, and professional learning. We heard that our school leaders and central office leaders were looking for ways, and they actually also had ideas and solutions to mitigate the staffing challenges that we were experiencing. And we also heard that they wanted a greater agency and input on decisions around resource use and opportunities to address the specific needs of their specific context, school community. Many of our leaders cited the equity innovation grants as a positive, as it provided that discretionary resources to solve school-based problems or areas to innovate. And we also heard that they wanted to explore ways to potentially compensate staff or find other ways for staff to compensate staff for taking additional responsibilities to support student learning and enable high quality collaboration and professional learning opportunities for teachers. So as a cabinet, we were and continue to be intentional about how we as central office can be of service to schools. How do we position our central office to create those conditions for school leaders and school leadership teams to do what we're asking them to do in service of student outcomes? So as a result, we've made some shifts and some themes around. Some of you might remember this, right? Increasing hourly rates and incentives for school-based staff, including our principals. Many of those moves were done at the end of this last year. Increasing our capacity in our Office of Talent Management to focus on critical hiring needs and pipeline development, right? You know that OTM is laser focused on the classroom vacancies that we have, and the goal of filling all of those before the start of the year. And we are now looking to increase those school-based flexible use dollars available to accelerate progress on key strategies that our principals and actually our community, right? When we did our 50 hours of engagement to develop the ESSER budget and to update the strategic plan. So wanted to give you some context as to synthesizing the feedback from our school leaders and the central office leaders that join on a monthly basis to think through our strategic plan and to give us feedback on the implementation. And the next slide. So before we get into the details on the scaling equity innovation grants, want to be explicit about what we're trying to accomplish with the dollars that we're describing, as scaling equity innovation grants. First, right, when we heard that our school leaders and school leadership teams wanted more agency in making decisions about resource use, specifically around ESSER, and we also heard, many on this call heard it as well, that capacity is tight. So, while this is an opportunity, it's that tension that we're trying to manage, that we really cannot significantly add more work on people's plates. Second, we still want the majority of the spending to be spent in schools, and we have budgeted the potential allocations as such, and I'll show that in a minute. And we're also looking to spend some of the resources that were not spent last year, right? That was the conversation and some of the data points that Chief Penn shared with you all on Monday. Right, we weren't able to spend primarily because of staffing shortages. So we still want this spending to stay as school-based spending. Third, this is a moment of also piloting and learning. As we are at the end of the day a learning organization, so we want to use these dollars to potentially test how we might be able to organize and invest in our highest needs and see where the greatest impact might be. And lastly, in terms of rationale, we want a way to acknowledge the unique challenges in a subset of our schools and provide additional resources and support to the students that need the resources the most. With, of course, and Chairman Rigger, I'm going to channel, I think, what you said, last time we were together on Monday, with an expectation for improved outcomes, right? That we're not just responsive to, we want more autonomy, or we want to inform decision-making, that it is that and, the expectation for all of us for improved student outcomes. So in coming up with our approach to allocating the funds, we're trying to balance several factors. And by the way, we're still trying to stay true to those investment principles that we also discussed on Monday. First and foremost is equity, right? Bringing an equity lens to every decision and resource allocation. Also acknowledging that there are needs in every school, regardless of need and size, if that makes sense, right? We know that some of our schools, particularly our neighborhood schools, have a higher level, deeper level of need. And we also know that there are needs across all of our schools. Third is that every school is unique, right? Student needs are unique. Their funding context is unique. Their ability to execute and capacity to execute on plans to spend these short-term dollars is also unique and different. And fourth is simplicity and making sure that we make this simple for stakeholders and to take advantage of this. So we've chosen to allocate dollars to every school through the formula. Let me talk about the formula. If we can go to the next slide, Christina. And again, working closely with central office and school level stakeholders over the past about 6 weeks to bring more definition to the expansion of the grants. And so we thought about how to allocate the dollars that schools would receive. So this is a criteria. Right, so this is an allocation over a 2-year period. And Chief Penn, please feel free to jump in at any time here, because we want to align it with, the time frame of the ESSER, the grant, and schools receive a base amount of $120,000, a little higher for Tier 4 and Tier 5 schools. The tiering, the allocation is the same as we always have implemented in terms of, when we developed the ESSER budget, there was specific tiering based on our indicators in terms of this state level accountability and the tiering of our schools. Also our early warning indicator system. And so this tiering is in alignment with that. And then schools receive, per pupil amount as well, based on their enrollment. And then again, to differentiate based on the level of need, knowing that Tier 4 and Tier 5 schools have a deeper level of need, higher concentration of need, they will receive additional funding. Chief Penn, I'm going to pause there to see if there's anything else that I've missed from, the financial technical perspective.
No, Dr. Torres Rodriguez, I think the only other thing that I would mention is although we set this out as a 2-year allocation, intending for the funds to obviously be spent by the time that the grants expire 2 years from now. One of the things we also did communicate is that if there is a need to spend it all in the first year, we would provide the flexibility to the schools to do that. Particularly if they were making a large purchase or there was something else that they were doing in terms of a 1-year initiative. The dollars would be flexible in terms of how we built the budget to support what the school was intending to do.
So in terms of, if you go to the next slide, Christina, in terms of some next steps, and while this is very high level, know that there are linked documents here that are very explicit, and 15-page documents with regard to guidance, and also an FAQ document that was an ongoing live document that we created based on the feedback that principals were giving us throughout the year, and specifically throughout the last 2 months of the school year, as we were trying to think about how do we reimagine the underspent and stay true to the spending guidelines, the federal spending guidelines, the state guidelines, and our principles for the spending. So some of the next steps that we've shared with principals here in the meeting, in the last principal meeting that we had with them in June, one is that we expect that school leaders engage stakeholders. They gather input from school staff and other stakeholders, including students and SGCs, that they review the explicit guidance document and application template. This is not that schools are just going to get an allocation and then they'll figure out how to spend the funds. There is going to be a process where there are teams that are going to be available to provide technical assistance. Our department, our academic department, for example, our Chief Avila and her team and the executive directors to provide guidance to our school leaders. There is an alignment between the application and the school's improvement plan, which is all connected to our major goals and obviously the state accountability system. And we also are very explicit about connection to our strategies and our work streams, so that anything that the school leader and with input from their community want to implement is in direct alignment. And then, the commitment from central office there with, central office hours, the timeline, because, Chief Penn, I know that some principals want to get done with, and begin implementing that in a month from now. But, we also have to manage what your team, can also do with regard to making sure that there's, seamless and coherence with the actual budget that we had submitted initially to the state and hence to feds.
That's right. And my team still has to review as the applications come in for how they're planning to spend the money to make sure that it aligns with the federal and state guidelines that were provided in terms of the spending. Chairman Rieger, I know we had a conversation on Monday around making sure people understood sort of what those guidelines were. And the link to the guidance document that's here, if you go to the very last page, there's actually some excellent resources that are provided there in terms of links. The very first of which is a link to the Connecticut State Department of Education's guidance document on how they intend these funds to be spent and what the state priorities are. And I'm looking for, I thought we had created sort of a 2-page summary of the federal and state guidelines that I'm still sifting through email to try to find at this point. But the resources that are at the very end of the guidance document are actually very good at explaining sort of what those criteria are in terms of how this grant is intended to be spent.
And also to extend on that, Chief Penn, that we did a lot of the legwork, and some of you on our board could remember that a lot of the alignment and the coherence we did between the state and federal documents and guidance and the way that we approached the development of our proposal and our budget. And so, in the guidance also are our priorities and strategies and even potential investments for principals to consider. Again, we don't want this to be a significant lift in terms of principals having to research, best practices. We have the document that is all included there as to what the research says, the potential partners, and some potential investments that they could consider. Let's see. And, the next 3 slides are part of the appendix, but, it's the potential allocation for each school based on the criteria that, the allocation methodology that I referenced. A few things that came up, and they're included in the FAQ, is, whether or not this was a requirement. That are we requiring every school to submit a grant? The answer is no, this is not a requirement, because already schools are getting the additional funding as part of the initial S or ARP strategies. Example, right, our class size reduction in K through 3rd grade in those schools that have the higher level of need, that is already accounted for. However, we do want, the expectation is for all schools to engage. There's, opportunity for staff engagement, student engagement, and certainly the SGCs. And to facilitate that, I know it's the summertime, but to facilitate that, there has been an allocation for each school up to $5,000 in extra duty pay that's available in case, right, staff, want to participate, and so they can be compensated over the summer for this. And so the expectation is, though not every school is expected, is required, I should say, to submit an application. It is a requirement that they engage and determine in collaboration with other stakeholders that they're not going to submit for these additional funds, so that decision is not made in isolation. Christina, if you want to kind of go through quickly, and just a quick pause over the next few slides that has the allocation. And so the total is a $15 million, opportunity, if you will, for schools. I'm going to pause there for any questions or any comments. Or Chief Chairman Rager, back to you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the dialogue and the information sharing. So I'll turn to my colleagues to see if there's any questions. Board Member Johnson.
Yes, good morning to everyone, and thank you for this information. I think this is I think we're headed in the right direction. I want to go back to the first like 10, 11 minutes of your presentation. You know, I've shared a story with you about a teacher who's, you know, possibly being grabbed to go to another district that's from the community, that lives in the community, that is truly invested in the community. And my question is, with the first 10 to 11 minutes of your presentation, is this potentially in response to that? Or is this more, is this in response to trying to keep our good staff, our good teachers, our good staff in place? That's my first question. And then I have another question. If you want me to ask it now or later, it's up to you.
That is one of the levers, right, that we want to continue to pull. We know that what we heard back when we initially did the engagement, we also were very mindful of the national data trends around the forecasting. This was over a year and a half ago, the forecasting of staffing challenges. And we lived it last year. And so, yes, this is an opportunity for not only, so at the district level, Pastor AJ, we are already responding to that, right? We have the incentives, we have the leadership opportunities, we have stipends. This is an added level of opportunity for schools, right, to respond with innovative ways that are specific to their community. So it's a yes and, I would say.
Okay, all right, that's clear. That's clear. The second question is more on the lines of communication, right? I think we do a fantastic job internally responding to some of the things that we see. I think we have an A+ staff, right? But I think the translation, and you'll always hear me say this, and you might have the same answer, or we might need a better answer. I'm not sure. But the way that we communicate these things to the community is like very important, because everything I've heard here today sounds, in my mind, if I'm just a parent just listening in a random conversation, I'm like, that sounds really great. But how do we communicate how we're effectively using these dollars? Or how do we bolster what we're already doing to broaden communication of how the average parent that's in a regular barbershop conversation or regular hair salon conversation can say, Hartford Public Schools has definitely invested the money in a way that I'm satisfied with. And again, you're probably not going to satisfy everyone, but the fact that people can talk about it and communicate it in an effective way is probably, you know, just helps us even better. So are there any plans to communicate what we've discussed in this proposal today, so the average parent, the average para, the average bus rider can comprehend and know that there's dollars at my school, that if I'm just active and involved, I can control those dollars and what I see fit that, you know, benefits not just my child, but the child in the buildings.
Yes, so I can share, and then I'll ask, I see Jesse is on, Senior Advisor Sugarman, who is now supporting with communications, and Chief Avila is also on the call. So I would say it's a multi-pronged approach, right? When we're talking about the staff, we, you know, inform staff via our staff communications and also in our newsletters. With regard to our families, right, through our SGC, which we meaning Chief Blackburg's office, communicate with, but also at the school level, right? That is something that school leaders also have a responsibility to dig into and lean into, and so we will continue to support that. I think the piece that we can always continue to improve on is a level of engagement in our communities. And that is why it's so important for us to leverage some of our what we call ambassadors, right? We know that our community partners, you know, we inform in our meetings with our community partners how we're evolving. and progressing towards not only our strategy, but to our spend. And so we're going to, continue to leverage our community partners. And then, as a board, we also ask for not only your suggestions and ideas, but also your help in, spreading, some of the progress from a tool perspective. You're not using that word, Mr. Johnson, but I heard you, how do we do it in a way that is, you didn't use the word consumable, but that, that is accessible to the parent, or someone at the barbershop. I think that's an area always for us and others, right, that serve in organizations, public organizations to always get better at. So I'll pause there and see if Jesse, you have anything that you wanna add.
Sure, yeah, thank you so much. So I would just note that, excuse me, the idea and the concept of these grants have been introduced in some of our family forums that we've conducted. But as we've now ironed out the details, finalized the funding model, and schools have an understanding of the budgets that they'll have and sort of the innovations that they'll be able to fund, we'll then begin a more collaborative approach with all of the schools to understand what's the best way to communicate with their families, one, on what's most important for them, but then also as ideas are finalized and start to be implemented, making sure that we celebrate the successes. And so our upcoming professional learnings in August, new teacher inductions, we're on the slate and the agenda as a communications team to make sure that we can lift not only these initiatives, but also initiatives at the district level on a whole.
Thank you. Seeing if there's other questions before I pose my two questions. Okay, so I want to echo Board Member Johnson and actually Superintendent challenge you and your team. So we're in a very unique situation, unique opportunity with a tremendous amount of capital in the district. And where I would challenge your team is to think differently of how we engage with our families. I would tell you that while your team does do a good job, I would like to see that team do better and think outside of the box of how we get this information to the families and to the communities. What I would say is, I use the analogy, right? You can't put a Ferrari engine in the Oldsmobile chassis, right? So this is something, right? We have the funds, once in a lifetime opportunity. We can't continue to. I would say it probably does not serve us well to think about how we communicate, engage with families in the community in the same way, right? So I would say it probably needs another layer of discussion of, what else can we do to get the word out? And then two, I guess, what's the plan B? So let's assume that not all schools apply and so forth, and there's some funding left over. What are we going to do with that? Because one of the things that, and again, that I shared, I think on Monday, that I'm very mindful of is we have this money. We need to spend it wisely. We need to, whatever projects we do, it needs to be sustainable. But I'm also very mindful of not giving money back to the feds, because I know exactly the potential narrative that could be developed if we do not use this money in an efficient way. So curious to know, what is the plan B, assuming that there is some monies left over from the innovation grant?
There are two things. One is that we know some schools have already said that they would like to have additional funding, right? So that's one. So there's a redeployment potentially that can happen. And then the other piece is we also know that central office departments, would like to participate in the opportunity. And so we are prioritizing schools. And so those are two moves for redeployment. Chief Penn, is there anything else that I'm missing on that one?
No, I think the real key one is the redeployment, which is why we've asked for the applications to come in within the next couple of weeks. so that if somebody is opting out, we kind of have early visibility to that. To then say if we have a school that's requested more funds that they were initially allocated, within the limit of the 15.4 million, we then have the opportunity to look at that application and say, okay, if you need another $25,000 or $50,000, we can move funds in that direction to make sure those needs are covered.
Okay. See if there's any other questions from my colleagues. Board Member Bello.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Just wanted to ask a question if there was, because I'm thinking about the summer, I'm thinking about the threshold to have community engagement be a part of the process, right? So preference would be people who engage, or schools and applications that point to some engagement of the community. I'm thinking, families are, working and if lucky, going on vacation, and within 2 weeks really feels really tight to me. Is there any way to do sort of like a letter of intent so that so administration can understand sort of what's being proposed as a request, and then maybe having further down the process, some sort of the actual application, and some due diligence around community engagement. I just worry about the time frame and the time of year, and then the requirement, which is valid and important, to have that community engagement. But I'm hoping maybe they already have that information, but or have gone through a process of inquiry with community, but just really hate to see that being a barrier if it, during the summer.
Chairman Rieger, I'm going to respond.
Yes, please.
So two things, and I appreciate the question, and we were mindful of those potential barriers when we engage in the design. And so principals have been engaging with this opportunity since early June, and they have up until September 15th to complete the plan. And so we wanted to provide enough flexibility while also balancing those school leaders that started early on the beginning of June to engage and so they can receive the funding over the summer. Ms. Bello, I think there'll be an opportunity to allow enough flexibility. The other piece is that the principal supervisors, the executive directors, are working closely with our school leaders in their networks to see if there are specific schools that they need to lean in more and provide additional flexibility. The engagement piece is something that is important and a non-negotiable for us. So I do not want to create any barriers. So thank you for lifting that.
Thank you. Board Member Brody.
Yes, my question is back a few slides where it was the per school allocation, and it was a reference to some schools are high needs and need more. How is that determined? Is it determined by the amount of, what's the criteria for it? I guess I'll start there.
Yes, Christina, if we can go to page 6, and Chief Penn, if you want to do a voiceover. So we have the tiering, Ms. Brody, if you remember, the tiering that is usually every year the State Department of Ed tiers the schools based on the accountability standards and where the schools fall with regard to need. And then we also have a tiering of schools by our early warning indicator system. And so here's an overview of the allocation. And again, this is in addition to the allocations that were done as a result of the initial design of the ESSER budget and application.
Ms. Brody?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to understand is a little bit maybe more of a definition about the tiers, right? Does it because obviously magnet schools probably are not in the high tiers, but there are students with high needs in magnet schools. So is it an amount of high need students? Like, I'm trying to dig deeper into that definition.
Yes, so the tiers, for example, the state identifies a high tier school as a school that might need turnaround or specific intervention in a specific area. Example, magnet school, SMSA, Sports and Medical Sciences Academy, was in a higher tier, meaning that they needed a higher level of need and support because of their the performance of the students that are considered multilingual learners. So that's an example, Ms. Brody, of how the tiers get allocated at the state level. And that does not mean that magnet schools don't get support. One of the things, or don't get an allocation, one of the things that I referenced earlier is that we are mindful that we know that we're urban, we operate in an urban context. So across all of our schools, there are students that have needs. But we know that there are some schools, especially in our neighborhood schools, that there's a higher concentration of need there. And so to balance that out, as you can see in the methodology, right, there's a base amount that all schools receive. It is very similar to how we approach our equity-centered budget formula, right, where we say there's a base and then there are added allocations based on the level of need, in this case, right, by the tiering. So magnet schools, oh, yes.
I want to be mindful of time because I know we have a full agenda. My understanding that the allocation or the definition of schools in need has not changed as defined by the state. Is that?
Those tiers
accurate?
do not change. You are correct. Those tiers do not change.
All right. So it's been the same. So as it relates to this conversation, it's been the same. At least the formula has been the same and will be the same moving forward. Is that correct?
As long as we have not been informed that the state is changing their tiering. So
okay,
correct.
So this is a derivative of the state.
It is in alignment, yes, with the state tiering system. Correct.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, Chairman,
Yes.
because this happens often. I'm asking a question, staff or the superintendent is explaining it. You interject with something else when I am like literally getting my explanation. I understand in interest of time, and I'm noticing that is not done with other board members, it's done with me, and I'm beginning to be frustrated. It's a lot of things that we discuss on these meetings are in other places, but right now in this moment, I'm asking for her to go deeper into this, because while this meeting is for us, it's also for the general public. That's not in other meetings. And I didn't think it was out of line. I actually thought it was really appropriate, and it was being dealt with in a gracious way, just to explain that we're in a lot of meetings, we get a lot of explanation. We're not gonna remember everything. So I'm just asking on my questions that the respect is given as it is given on other questions without being interrupted, and you're re-clarifying. I don't need that. I'm asking it from the superintendent. So I'm just asking for that respect. And on another note, I'll just say, when discussing about sending money back to the federal government, that I'm hoping, as we have probably done every year on the parent involvement funds, the funds that we have for, that is designated specifically for parent involvement and to get them on board with the education of their children in that process and understanding it. I'm hoping this year, again, we did not send money back to the federal government, because what we see in our family and community engagement meetings for years is that the money is not being spent. And I can't imagine that we don't have a need to have our parents on board with that. I'm done.
Thank you, Board Member Brody. And for the record, I did not interrupt you. I simply provided clarification of the definition has been the same as of yesterday and will be the same going forward. So I don't believe you were interrupted in your questions, but duly noted. Superintendent, I'll turn it back over to you to move us forward.
Yes, so again, I wanted to make sure that I point you all, while I don't mean to get anyone in the details and in the weeds, in slide 7, we have linked the guidance document and the frequently asked question document from our engagement over the weeks and over the months with our school leaders in response to the development. And before I conclude this section, I do want to shout out our, of course, Chief Penn, his team, Chief Avila, but also the principal advisory group that we have that was instrumental in making sure that, it didn't land as something that was just piling on the principal's plate. We are being very mindful that the principal is, and the research confirms, is the most important agent of change. And we want to make sure that we're empowering our leaders with the resources that they need, but also creating space for them to do the work and not continue to overwhelm. So with that said, that concludes this presentation.
So moving to the next agenda item. Unless there's any question, are there any questions from the team? Okay, seeing none. Superintendent?
Thank you. The next presentation is around safety and security in schools. And I know that I have Attorney Wilson here, and Attorney Wilson, just for context and background, oversees our security staff and works closely with the Office of Schools around school safety. And so for just the agenda, I want to have an overview of the current safety protocols and procedures, review some of the student, family, and staff survey data from our climate survey. I know that we have an upcoming, an additional deep dive of that survey. But as it relates to this, we want to specifically talk about specific items that point to how some of our stakeholders perceive their safety, and also talk about our incremental safety measures and then policies related to safety. And I do want to upfront be transparent about the fact that we have been, for the last 2 years, receiving inquiry from some of our families and even some of our community members about metal detectors. And so, as some of you board members might recall, a stabbing that took place at Weaver High School. And we were trying to and continue to be very mindful and intentional about listening, taking a listener stance and a learner stance as to the request behind metal detectors and how to go about making a decision like that, even though there's policy that we'll review that speaks to what we could do. And so we can start by current safety measures, and Mr. Wilson, I'll tag you in, but I do want to also remind us that our code of conduct is grounded in equity with a focus on restorative practices and a commitment to making sure that our students and everything that we say, that we do, that they feel seen, valued, and heard. And so we know that that also means physical and emotional safety. And so, Mr. Wilson, Attorney Wilson, I'll turn it over to you so that you can kind of take us through this slide.
So this slide unpacks our current safety measures in our schools currently. We have approximately 2 SSOs per our schools. And we have substitute SSOs to fill in when we have call outs, etc. Currently, just kind of like a broad brush overview, currently we're staffed at approximately 105 school security officers. We like to be at about 120. We're actively hiring right now to get to that 120 number. And we like to be staffed at about 10 substitute officers to support call outs, or situations where security officers are not available to be in the buildings for other reasons. So right now we have one sub, but we're actively hiring throughout the summer, and we have a lot of a few pending hires that we're getting through right now. The next portion of here speaks to our safety screenings. The current status of the safety screenings, we have over the last year have done no-touch wanding with the metal detector wands, and we have done also the visual bag inspections. Typically, the way that looks, we've actually had done these without notice on occasion, depending on what was occurring or what safety or security issue we might have had in a building. Typically, the wanding operation involves extra SSOs going to a school site, in addition to the normal level of SSOs at that particular building, doing the no-touch wanding, and that's paired with a bag inspection for the child as well. We also have utilized canines over the last school year. This in response to the issue that we had at SMSA, et cetera, and just making sure that we are being attentive to situations where there might be drugs in the buildings. So we've utilized canine search. I will indicate, consistent with our policy, on no occasion would the canines have any contact with students. And every occasion that we did canine searches, there were the buildings were in codes. And we were in and out, I want to say, in less than 45 minutes on every occasion that we did the canine search. We called the code, the canines came in, sniffed the lockers, and they were out of the buildings pretty swiftly. We also have a Raptor school safety screening program, which as part of that, the Raptor system, it does a check of the individual's license and checks for whether or not the individual is a sexual offender or has a criminal issue that should preclude that person from having access to a building. Our visitors are required to check in with the SSO who's at the entry waypoint of the buildings. And as I just indicated, the Raptor system screens the government issued ID for any concerns. We have also been actively pursuing grants, etc. Have done updates to our video surveillance systems and our cameras throughout the district. The last point captures that we've at this point approximately have video surveillance systems with the approximately 1,500 cameras throughout the district.
Thank you, Attorney Wilson. I know that before we get into the numbers, I just want to do a voiceover of, the fact that the safety screenings, which we communicated to all of our families multiple times, middle through high school, were done randomly, and that there were weapons that were confiscated in those screenings that were conducted at Buckley, both North and South Campus, Hartford High, and Weaver. And so ranging from knives, mace cans, tasers. Attorney Wilson, you kind of have the list of some of the items that were confiscated and turned over to Hartford Police Department, right? Despite, safety measures, students still were coming to school with some of those items, and, in conversations, and you can speak probably more to this than I can, Attorney Wilson, conversations with students, oftentimes the response is, were that students felt that on their way to school, right, they did not feel safe on their way to school. And so they thought that they somehow needed, to have the item with them. And so, Chairman Rigger, if at some point you would like a report on those very specific numbers, or the board, we can certainly provide that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that would be helpful for the board. I do see Board Member Johnson has a question.
Yeah, I'll make this swift as possible. I remember a young lady coming to the Board of Education meeting maybe last year, speaking to the fact that she is a young woman, as you stated, Superintendent. She does walk to school, and she was suspended due to having mace or something with her, right? And I, as the chair of the policy committee, right, I get, like, sometimes good policy and like a perfect storm, right? Like, to me, that's just the perfect storm. Here's a young lady who is showing up to school but wants to protect herself, but according to our policy, it kind of makes it very, very plain that nothing is allowed in school, right? So I know this work kind of probably more than likely rests on me and the policy committee, but I would like to hear, a practical explanation of how something like that works when you have a young person who I believe genuinely wants to go to school, but also wants to not be involved with the nonsense that may be around, maybe around her, around them. What's the simple explanation? 30-second kind of elevator response to that.
You're right to lift it. Chairman, may I respond?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, you're lifting it. So we it's a tough balance because we do have a policy, and this is why we often we look at every situation on an individual case, right? We examine all of the context, and then we think about what is a restorative response, right, to that situation, right? Because we also have to think about all potential other cases in which there has been a weapon and there has been actual evidence of potential intent, right, to do something else, unlike this case that you're referencing with this young lady. So I do believe that it warrants an examination of the policy, and research, and even I believe further student engagement on this, Reverend Johnson. And that's a recommendation that I'm also, making toward the end of this presentation.
Thank you.
Seeing if there's others with questions. Seeing none, Superintendent, you may continue.
Yes. So the next, I want to say about 10 slides, and I'm not going to dive deep into all of them. We have also been, mining the responses in our climate survey, and I'll leave you with the data points, but I'll just kind of voice over a few of them. Right. We looked at students, families, and staff, and we have about 2,600 students that responded. Not all of students responded. And, students, the question is how I feel safe from harm in my school. And the majority of students did agree with that statement. But as you can see, there are some that did not agree. At Hartford High and Buckley, just over half of the students that responded stated that they do not feel safe from harm in their school. In our next slide, the question is around the rules, right? To your point, Mr. Johnson, the Reverend Johnson, around, policy and rules and code of conduct. Most students agreed that the rules in their schools keep them safe. We did have, some schools that felt that was not the case. HMTCA, for example, right? You see there that some students said that they did not feel the rules did not keep them safe. In our next site, we did, want to get at student voice, additional student voice in it, besides from the student voice that I have heard and that Chief Avli and her team have heard during the wanding, the searches, the screenings. I know that I was at the last screening that took place at Hartford High and heard many voices, student voices, about the fact that they like, for lack of a better word, is what they're saying, that we are doing, the searches and that we should do this regularly. And so recently wanted to hear from additional students with some focus groups, students in current summer school, comprehensive high schools and Kinsella. And so some students, 11 out of 28 students, for example, said that they do feel very safe in their school. 9 students were neutral. When asked if metal detectors would make them feel safer, about a third of the students in the focus group said that they would make them feel safer, and another third said maybe. So, you can interpret that as the majority believe that metal detectors could have a positive impact on how they feel safe at school, whether or not this would make them feel safe at school. We also are looking at safety and the impact that it can have on school attendance, right? We're trying to filter everything to think about how does it impact students coming to school. We see that 78% of the students in the focus group said that, if they felt unsafe, they still, would come to school, that it wasn't a big impact. But the next data slide here, right, is something that we keep thinking about when we had if you remember the TikTok gun violence, the threats, we did see a significant dip in our average daily attendance following those national threats that were happening. When we look at our families, they have a more favorable view of school safety. I would say that, these are not all of our families that are responding, but, families have a more favorable view about safety than students do. So the questions are the same, right, in terms of the safety and then the rules. And so in the next slide, we see, right, the rules in my child's school help keep children safe. And more than 75% of responding families at every school, except HMTCA, we could see, believe that rules at their school keep, their child safe. And lastly, we also wanted to see what staff were thinking. And so staff, the majority of staff that responded, and granted, if you look across the total staff responding, these are very low numbers. And so the staff that did respond, the majority, in some schools, for example, Capital Prep, you see, although it was a very small N response sample, 15, you see there how they perceive their safety in the buildings. And then the next one is regarding to norms, and whether or not they believe that our norms are keeping them safe. So I know that that's a lot of data, but I want to now shift to the request that I have made of our team to look at metal detectors for a pilot that we would like to implement. And so there are Chief Attorney Wilson, I'll let you speak to the two visuals here.
Thank you, Superintendent. So what we're actually looking at is the Garrett model walkthrough metal detector. The picture you're looking at is actually from Wilbercross High School down in New Haven. I took the opportunity to go down to Wilbercross with our director of security and some of our security supervisors to observe the children's arrival in the morning and the use of the metal detectors and getting them through the metal detector swiftly into class on time. What you can see here is there's 3 metal detectors inside the main entrance. They support this operation with additional security officers, which the one security officer will be standing as the child walks through the metal detector to see if it goes off. These particular metal detectors will alert you as to what particular portion of the body should be wanded. So the child would walk through, and the way they did it in New Haven is if it alerted at let's say the waist, the child will be wanded in that particular area. You'll see tables on either side of the metal detectors. These metal detectors don't scan the backpack. So as the child walks in, they put the backpack on the table. There's a security officer that's actually doing a visual inspection of the bag as the child walks through the actual metal detector. If the child walks through the metal detector with no incident, after the bag is searched, the bag is provided to the child, and the child is on the way to class. These models. This model of metal detector is approximately $3,900 to $4,400 per unit. So this is the next. We've had conversations about, metal detectors that are more, for lack of a better term, concealable and fit better into to doorways and don't give the impression as to what we just saw at those walk-through metal detectors in New Haven. So I also looked into this open gate system. So by way of background, I did meet with the one of the reps for this particular organization. These were designed to essentially alert for a firearm, but at the same time allowing mass flow. A lot of times this device has been utilized in stadiums, individuals with large crowds. These are designs to hit on a firearm. This particular device will not pick up a knife that's less than 4 inches. But you could walk through this with a backpack, and if there's a firearm, it's going to alert to the firearm. These devices are approximately $16,500 per unit.
Attorney Wilson, one thing that I want to, a question that has come up for me is, in the searches, there have been no firearms. I just want to go on the record to say that have been found. I mean, facsimile guns right? That's a different conversation.
Correct. I mean, we've got pellet guns, facsimile guns, yeah, but we have not found a firearm.
But the majority of the items that have been confiscated have been knives. Would you say knives and mace cans?
Correct. Knives, mace cans, tasers. And I would say largely the knives that we've confiscated, this device would not pick it up.
Because they're the smaller.
Exactly.
I see. Thank you. So as we, next slide, please. As we continue to explore the logistics of implementing piloting metal detectors, I want to just lift, and Board Member Johnson, going back to you, the relevant board policies that at least warrant deep, just that we lean in and potentially consider updating. Right, they're in the appendix in this slide with experts from, I think, Attorney Wilson, you worked diligently on this, and perhaps with Chief Dr. Silver here on, different policies that inform the use of metal detectors, student searches, consequences when items are found. And so, thinking about implementing this new safety measure, also staying grounded in being fair, equitable, and restorative in our approach to handling situations when the items are found. So, right, I know that Attorney Wilson has talked to me about potentially, is it an amnesty box that we could implement where students volunteer the items without penalty? I mean, that obviously requires thoughtful research and dialogue. And of course, we're going to continue. We are fortunate and grateful for the partnership that we have with not only the city, but the police department, They continue to be thought partners for us. Hartford Police, Attorney Wilson, you have regular meetings with our partners at HPD. So again, trying to go at this, meaning keeping our schools and our students and staff and visitors safe from multiple angles. So, piloting metal detectors would be, yet another tool in the box. I'll pause there. Attorney Wilson, is there anything else from a policy perspective?
Nothing additional to add at this time, Superintendent.
Chairman, back to you.
Thank you. Looking at the screen, any questions from the board?
Yes.
Board
Chairman
Member
Ricker.
Johnson,
Thank
Board
you.
Member Johnson, followed by Board Member Oliver.
Okay, great. So, I'm not going to say whether I'm with or for the metal detectors at this point. I mean, I think my first reaction is, nah, but I think the data that you presented, may sway me otherwise. But I just want to know, and something I guess we have to research. Again, this probably lands on probably one or two committees on this call that have to look at this. But I want to know what the effects of metal detectors on young people's psychology as they go to school, if this makes a difference to them or it makes it feel safer or less safer, or just don't even want to be involved, right? I'm interested to know, what that is. I'm also interested to know, Yahira, it looks like she just got off, but I'm interested to know what young people have felt going to school with these things, because that ultimately is going to affect their production and, just the certain things that they need to continue their education. So I am up for the conversation. I am just more concerned about the unintended consequences of bringing this back, right? I didn't go to school in the rough 90s. Phil grew up as a 90s baby, 80s baby, may have some, experience with that time and era where this was really a thing, and it looks like we're coming back there. But I really want to know what the unintended consequences of having devices like this in schools.
Superintendent?
Yes, the team is looking at the research on the other side, right? Because we know that it can potentially, be a trigger for students, and so we want to be mindful of that. We're also looking at what other spaces, have metal detectors, and also curious about when our youth engage in those spaces, what their feelings, perceptions are. I know that like hospitals, and I don't know actually if maybe Miss Oliver can shed some light on whether our libraries have metal detectors. I think I've seen something that looks like a metal detector. I'm not sure, but I am mindful, Mr. Reverend Johnson, of not wanting to, create alarm. All I can share is the voices that I've heard directly, right, from the students that we have engaged with, either in our community forums after there have been an event, an unfortunate event, or during the searches themselves.
Thank you. Board Member Oliver, followed by Board Member Ledger, and then Escobar.
Thank you. I guess my question is, I want to understand, you mentioned, Superintendent, that there's a pilot. The idea is to design a pilot. What exactly is the pilot going to test? Like, what are going to be the measures that help to determine this was successful and we should consider this more, or not so successful, we shouldn't consider it?
Yeah, so that's something that we're thinking about in terms of the pre and the post. You're not using those words, but that is what is coming up for me. And so, one measure would be that, we no longer have 180 knives, right, in a year. That's a data point, for example, right, that we can compare. And then the other thing is, from a a student perspective, engaging with the students as to how were they feeling before, are they feeling different, post the implementation, before we can decide if this is something that needs to be implemented district-wide. I myself, again, began hearing of the requests 2 years ago, if you recall, when we had the incident at Weaver. And the response then was, we really want to think about other ways to respond, which is why we've had this more comprehensive approach where we have, the wandings that are unannounced, so that it wasn't that we were going from an incident happened immediately to, to the metal detectors. I think now, because we've had the other, tragedies that have happened in other school communities, and coupled with the findings from the searches that we've done, it warrants us, at the very least, stepping back and putting it all together to see whether or not it warrants a different response. But it would be a pre and post, if you will, of the current data that we have. What does that look like, after implementing a pilot? And then, again, just perception and feelings primarily for our students.
Out of respect for my colleagues and their other questions, but I do want to put this out there. It can be answered later. I would like to know how it will be determined which school will be selected for a pilot. So thank you.
Board Member Ledger.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. As an educator, and a person who is very involved in social emotional learning and mindfulness and family engagement, metal detectors are a trigger, and they can be a trigger, but more importantly, they can bring about trauma or reignite trauma that has been experienced by, young people who have dealings in the court system. Because when you see metal detectors, they're usually at court, or they're, at airports, which, some of the students may go to airports, some may not, but more with court. And there have been instances when I speak to students, having worked in New Haven at one point, and working in urban districts. When you see metal detectors, it raises red flags to students. It raises, like, okay, am I safe? Why are metal detectors here? And if someone wants to do something, they're going to do it. Or they're going to take precautions if they see that there are metal detectors there. They're like, okay, well, what's another way that I can do whatever it is that I want to do? I think that it would be more effective in being proactive with regards to utilizing the partnerships, like, Superintendent talked about with the Hartford Police Department, having conversations, familiar faces, to see what it is that the students are feeling, to see, if there's some type of tension that's going on, you usually hear about it before something happens. So I think that there's so much more that we could be doing with the funds than to be putting metal detectors in the schools. There's one question that I do have with regards to the Raptor and how it's being implemented and utilized. The question that I have is around education for the teachers and the staff. Have the teachers and paras, the school staff been trained on how to respond with regards to the Raptor when it does go off? And are the school staff members required to install the app on their phones? Those are my questions.
Superintendent?
I'm
Or
going to ask
Mr.
Attorney
Wilson?
Wilson. Yes, thank you.
So the Raptor screening tool is utilized by the security officer at the front desk station that actually does the check. So if it goes off, that individual is the one that responds to the visitor or individual that we got a hit on. So it wouldn't be the teacher or the paraprofessionals.
Thank you. Board Member Escobedo.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry, my internet was going in and out. I apologize. So, one question really, and it'll probably be a hard one to answer, but I just want to reiterate. I would love that in terms of what Ms. Oliver also said, in terms of knowing where this is going to be piloted at the schools. But my question is more so when I was, I'm not that far off from the kids who are currently in high school, right? So I do remember it was a time when things were very rough at Hartford High, and we had metal detectors. I think they're still there. I don't know. The point is, I remember going through all that, and I think unfortunately, this is not just Hartford; it's all over the country. We are in a time where violence is the norm, which is very unfortunate, right? And a lot of our kids are desensitized to that. So I actually am in the opinion that these metal detectors will help a lot of our kids feel safe. And yes, there is a hard balance between not re-traumatizing kids, right? That is a hard balance, but I am in agreement with these metal detectors, but that is not my question. My question is more so geared towards what happens outside before they get inside the school, right? So I'll give you an example. At Hartford High, prior to the school year ending, there was a kid who ended up getting stabbed around the corner from Hartford High, right? And there was a teacher driving and she saw him on the floor, et cetera. A whole bunch of things happened afterwards. So my question is this, and I can't speak to the, elementary and middle school, but at the high school level, a lot of the beef, a lot of the drama that occurs seeps into our schools. Metal detectors is a tool in the toolbox that can help deter that within the school. But I'm also more concerned as soon as they step out, right? They're still around school. They're technically not on school grounds, but they're not that far from the school, right? Literally around the corner, around the block, and obviously that's not our purview, right? So for me, it's like, what can HPD do with our partnership, right? How can we strengthen that to have both of them like this, right? In school and outside of school, because I've been seeing a lot of that outside the school, around the corner, literally down the block, where kids are either jumping each other or kids getting stabbed because of outside stuff that's going on. So again, I don't know what that looks like, but I really, really think that HPD needs to step up a little bit more in terms of that. And we need to figure out how that partnership will look like to mediate those issues that are happening literally around the corner of the schools.
Yeah, Superintendent, before you answer that, I want to be mindful of time. I know we have other agenda items, but I do think Board Member Escobedo's bring up a good point in the sense that the metal detectors is just part of the solution, that there needs to be a much broader conversation of what happens outside of school grounds and what partnerships can we leverage to make sure that our kids are safe, both in our schools, clearly with the metal detectors, but also outside of school when they're walking to school or walking home from school. So I know that's a much bigger lift and requires different stakeholders at the table to have that discussion. I don't think we'll be able to solve it today, but I do want to be, again, mindful of time and other agenda items. So are there, Ms. Escobedo, does that suffice? I think you actually bring up a good point.
Yeah, I didn't expect an answer because like I said, this is a hard question. It's not, I did not expect an answer, but that is something I wanted to raise and lift because that's a huge concern. A lot of our kids are either getting into stuff outside of school or it's literally happening around the corners from our school or down the block. So I agree that this is a deeper conversation and we need HPD and other partners at the table for this discussion.
Yeah, so superintendent, what I would say is let's make a note of that broader conversation that needs to take place. But I think, are there any other questions as it relates to the metal detectors, the topic of metal detectors from other board members?
Yes, I have maybe a comment.
Ms. Brody?
Yes, that I'm hoping that, I know we did surveys on, like if a child, if children feel safe at school, but if this is a hard one, right? You want kids to feel safe, but you don't want to walk through a metal detector, right? So how do that get balanced? But I'm just hoping that we're going to really do, if we're going in I think whether or not we're going in the direction or deciding on metal detectors or not, that we really have some deep conversations with our families and our community around that, right? You don't want someone to not feel they have input in something like this, but at the same time, you want them to own it as a community if this is the direction that makes them feel safer at school. So just making sure we do some, real community, have some real community discussions around the topic.
Thank you, Board Member Brody. Are there any other questions? All right, so Superintendent, I think I heard some takeaways from Board Member Oliver, as well as others as it relates to the pilot and some of the metrics that's going to be used. So if you could get back to us on that, that would be super helpful.
I will, thank you. And also in response to Ms. Brody's comment around engagement.
Okay, I believe we can move to the next agenda items.
Yes, I'll take that. We do have several contracts on the agenda, and we'll start with Hartford Performs in the interest of time. They have prepared slide decks. I don't know if board members stay just a little over, and I'll ask each person. We have Tracy Avicoli for Hartford Performs to quickly go over their slide deck. So in the interest of time.
So I unfortunately, I do apologize. I have a 10 o'clock that I had to transition to. So I will leave it to the leadership team to facilitate the rest of this discussion. I'm not sure if first Vice Chair Johnson or second Vice Chair Ms. Oliver is able to help out, but I unfortunately do have to leave.
And I'm getting a message, Ms. Escobar also has a 10 a.m., so she has to leave. Any other board members can stay a little longer or have to hop off?
Yeah, I can I can stay.
Okay. So let me share real quick. Let me get to the right one. Actually, apologies, wrong one. But Tracy, feel free to, I'm sorry that we have Tracy Avicoli on the line. Feel free to start.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me today, board members and Hartford Public Schools colleagues. My name is Tracy Avicoli. I'm the Director of Arts and Wellness for Hartford Schools. Today, we're going to be reviewing the contract continuation for Hartford Performs, which has been a community partner with us since 2009. All right, so we are going to quickly understand what the scope of services offered by Hartford Performs are. Quickly discuss the school outcomes and successes from the engagement that we've had with Hartford Performs, and review the proposed scope of work for the following school year. So like I said, this is an annual contract. The timeframe of the contract would be August 22 to June 23. It's a total of $314,000, which comes out of special funds, specifically our Alliance grant. And this is received through our office. We are in the Office of Academics. So why Hartford Performs? Just really quickly, Hartford Performs has, like I said, been a community partner that's been dedicated exclusively to Hartford Public Schools since 2009. Hartford Performs compiles all of our region's extensive arts and culture resources and provides a catalog of over 300 arts programs for all of our students in our 30 pre-K through 8 schools in HPS. Harvard Performs apportions programs to students on a per capita cost basis, which is sufficient for each student to receive at least 2 programs per school year. However, depending on the teacher selections, many of our students will receive more than 2 during the course of a school year. Harvard Performs facilitates professional learning as well to our HPS teachers and literacy coaches to support our school district's literacy goals through engaging instructional strategies that they can use in the classroom and with the teachers who they coach. Harvard Performs engages families in creative ways to support their children's learning and connection to school at home. They continually adapt to the needs of the district and our ever-changing needs of our district. And then lastly, Harvard Performs does attract private sector support to magnify our HPS investment. So for every dollar that we invest as a school district, Harvard Performs raises an additional $3 to provide services for HPS students. The alignment to our district model for excellence, clearly through high quality teaching and learning, also seen in our priority for engaging family and community partnerships, as well as providing a welcoming culture and nurturing climate. So the scope of work from last school year, 21-22, all student programming through all of our K-8 schools. Again, professional learning for teachers and literacy coaches. Our grades 4 and 5 teachers did receive professional learning last year in some of our lifted needs of the ELA department, specifically around some of the literacy content standards. They also provided professional learning specifically to the literacy coaches in the elementary grades so that they would be armed with additional engaging instructional strategies to use with the teachers who they coach. And then they also have been providing professional learning for our unified arts teachers. This past year, we had a series of professional learning sessions with Ballet Hispanico from New York City with our dance and theater teachers, as well as with the New Britain Museum of American Art with our art teachers as well. Some additional areas of work from 21-22 came from 2 grants that we had that they applied for us, which we received fantastic benefit from. One was for our neighborhood middle schools. This was a grant provided from the Harvard Foundation for Public Giving, which allowed us to pilot some long-term artist in residency programs in our neighborhood middle schools last year, and which was very successful. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Also, we were able to expand our pre-K programming in 3 of our neighborhood pre-K, in 3 of our schools, our pre-K schools, Kennelly, West Middle, and Rawson. And then also they were able to provide some family engagement literacy nights, specifically at Parkville last year. So sorry, this is a little bit small, but just for some impact of the student programs that were provided last year. So you'll be able to see some numbers and data results from teacher surveys and also some student responses as well. So our this K-8 student programs, they provided 563 programs, a total of over 2,000 hours in all of our pre-K through 8 schools. You'll see that 64% of the teachers reported observing some effect on student attendance when students knew that Harvard Performs was coming. 99% of teachers who took the surveys reported that Harvard Performs programs helped develop students' vocabulary, social skills, and 93% reported them enhancing their problem-solving skills. The pre-K program, just a couple of notes there. 91% of teachers reported that the pre-K program helped their students demonstrate understanding in the subject matter. And then to skip over to the middle school pilot, 75% of our unified arts teachers who participated in this pilot program reported having a teaching artist co-teach with them, which was really what the structure was, gave them more time to work with and support their students in class. The next slide depicts the impact of professional learning that was provided last year from Harvard Performs. You'll see that there were 4 instances of, or 4 types of professional learning. Again, those literacy coaches, 100% of the literacy coaches reported that they will use at least one strategy with their students, with their teachers and students. I'll skip down to grades 4 and 5. 97% of those teachers reported feeling confident leading students to express emotions or mood through color. That was one of the strategies that they had practiced through a teaching artist. The pre-K teachers reported, 100% of them reported understanding how using musical elements can benefit student learning with text. And then for our unified arts teachers, 100% of our dance and theater teachers reported feeling confident in employing strategies learned from Ballet Hispanico and reported the training was culturally relevant and engaging. And then lastly, the scope of work for 22-23 will be ongoing. We're going to be continuing to deepen and expand programming for our pre-K through 8 programs in all of our pre-K through 8 schools. We are going to be we're actually going to be shifting our middle school framework for service delivery in the Forum neighborhood middle schools to mirror that long-term artist in residency format that was piloted last year due to the feedback that we received both from the teaching artists, the students, and our HPS teachers. And then right before today, actually, we received notification that Harper Performs has also was given a grant again to extend those pre-K programs in 3 new pre-K schools. So pre-K at Belize, Naylor, and Parkville next year will also receive extended programming, which also will lead to extended professional learning for those pre-K teachers, along with continued professional learning for literacy coaches, K-5 classroom teachers, and UA teachers. And then also learning, continuing to lift that family engagement piece is something that Harper Performs really wants to work heavily on in continuing to provide for our schools. So at least 2 arts-based literacy nights in our K-8 buildings, and then 3 of those, 3 additional pre-K family engagement nights at Belize, Naylor, and Parkville. Okay, so go ahead, Christina.
I was gonna say, I know we're over time, but I don't know if you introduce yourself with your title just to make sure every board member knows your role.
I did, but I'm the Director of Arts and Wellness. I oversee all of arts programming as well as physical education and health for the district, and I am currently in the Office of Academics.
And we also have Ree from Hartford Performance on the line. If any board members have any questions. Sorry, AJ, I just I don't know.
Yeah, no, go ahead, sis. You know, I don't necessarily have any questions. I think that the the outcomes, but I see that Francois has a question. So Francois, I'm gonna give the floor to you.
Thank you, and good morning.
Morning.
This is music to my ears with regards to extending and increasing the programming for the arts. I just want to know, is there a component where the families, I know that there are supposed to be family events, a few evenings throughout the school year, but is there anything that's outside of those events where families can come in and do some work?
Specifically with Harper Performs?
Yes.
That hasn't happened yet. Ree, you can speak to this a little bit more. Typically when Harper Performs has engaged families, it has been through the literacy lens and really helping our families to support their children at home with engaging strategies that they provide for our teachers so that they would be able to then replicate that at home with their child. So for instance, how can they tap a steady beat to a children's literature book? How can they make a character come alive a little bit more when they're reading aloud to their child? So some of those things have been done at the school level through scheduled family nights that they've already had. But if there's anything that I'm missing in terms of a potential opportunity that we might be missing.
I would say with the long-term residencies with the middle school programs, they involve a culminating event, and we would invite families into those. And that happened actually this year at Milner the families were invited in to see that. We also, because part of our programming is to bring students out to cultural venues and historic homes and museums. A lot of times family members are the chaperones for those. And when they are, we try to survey them to find out, okay, so how did you see the connection to your child's education? And what value do you see in this? And is this something you would be interested in continuing?
Great, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Ms. Tracy, is that all you had on the presentation?
That's all I had,
Okay.
unless anybody had anything else.
No, I mean, just to echo what Francois said, I mean, this is music to my ears. Again, arts and music and just all that is something that really carried me through my educational experience. And I think that offering it is something that I heard the community say that they wanted. I mean, obviously music is something that is next, but just to keep that in front of us, but I appreciate the work that is done. Anything else, Christina?
No, just know it will be up for a vote at the July 19th board meeting. And as always, with any contract tonight, if all the attachments are in board docs review, please send me any questions that you have so that we can be sure to have them answered at the board meeting if there's any additional questions. So no, other than that, we can move on to the contract approval for the athletic trainers. And thank you, Tracy, and all for joining. We have Heidi Schmidt.
Thank you, Tracy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I almost thought it was afternoon, sorry. I'm Heidi Schmidt. I have met many of you previously in other presentations I have given. I am the Assistant Athletic Director for the district. So every year, obviously, one of my major priorities is trying to get equity in athletic training services in our district at all of our 8 high schools. Seeing this has become a major expectation. So we had put our RFP out last year for athletic training services. Unfortunately, right now, athletic trainers are at a premium. They're very difficult to get. And we are working each year to improve and increase the number of trainers that we have at our schools. And our ultimate goal is to have one at each of our high schools that do offer athletics. So I put together a little bit of a presentation as to why it is important and why we should continue this drive. So the district model of excellence for our 4 core strategies, it meets in with all 4 of them. It provides modeling and information for college and career choices and athletic medical field. It assists in ensuring buildings and fields are safe and engaging learning environments. It's educated and certified in the area of athletic trainers, and it's a wonderful partnership opportunities with Trinity Health. Why do we need athletic trainers here in Hartford? It's education for student athletes and coaches on preventing injuries. That's our #1 priority, is that we want to prevent the injury before it happens. Equity amongst all schools in the districts. Other districts expect us to have that quality of care here when their athletes come here to participate, and vice versa. When we go to their districts to play, they also have the same medical care for our student athletes. Safety measures for all of our athletes. Coverages for practices and games. Practices are actually more important to have our athletic trainers and the continuity of the same trainer in the school so that they can work with our student athletes on a daily basis during the season, off season, and takes that responsibility off the coaches so that we are getting a absolute medical diagnosis for the athletes. And there is follow-up with the parents, doctors, and coaches and school nurses to make sure that our student athletes are returning to play when they are ready to come. Game coverage is for anything that happens in the game. They are the first responder. They are there to make the call so that the call has to be made by the coach, and they can take the appropriate measures on taking care of the injury that had happened. Now with new COVID restrictions and concussion return to play is a 5-step process to get back into games after they are cleared by the doctor. And this is really difficult for a coach to have to do on a daily basis if they have 1 or 2 concussions, especially in football, where we see a lot of concussion issues. We want to make sure that we're not sending them back too soon. We want to make sure that the same trainer is looking at the athlete so they can see the progression and look at the signs and symptoms and be able to measure them from day to day to make sure that we're sending them back safely. Emergency action plans. These are what we should have these in all of our schools. We should have what happens if there's an emergency in the gym, what happens if there's an emergency out in the fields, what happens if there's an emergency when they're out running for cross country. And they are our athletic trainers that we want to bring into the school districts are trained on how to develop these plans and implement them with the coaches and the schools and the security and any other safety personnel that are going to be on the fields or in the gyms. Monitor health and safety procedures, students, facilities, practices, games. That's just repetitive. The athletic trainer is the most qualified to identify unique circumstances that may impact health and safety of student athletes. And again, it's immediate care for our student athletes, where it takes a lot of burden off of the families to not have to go and get them appointments or take them places, especially if they don't have the transportation nor the funding. This will take care of all that. We also have a partnership with Trinity Health and St. Francis, where we have a physician in each of the schools every Tuesday. They come in and they will do a follow-up and they will take a look at our student athletes to see if they need any further care beyond the athletic trainer. Next slide. Why every school should have one. Again, immediate care. We can't emphasize that enough. We work with our physicians, as I had just said, and they also collaborate with our school nurse and they look after the entire student body. Beneficial to parents. The daily presence of the athletic trainer also provides an opportunity for on-site injury rehabilitation and reconditioning, and it is strongly recommended by the CIAC, the American Medical Board Association, and the National Athletic Trainers Association. And I had spoke with Dr. Doug McGilpin, who is our Hartford Public School medical advisor, and he's actually sent a letter, if you would like to see it, how he strongly advises that each of our high schools that have athletics have an athletic trainer on site on a regular basis. This is just information. I know you get a copy of the PowerPoint, so this is just something if you want to further read why the CIAC is on board with suggesting that you get athletic trainers as well as the AMA and the NATA endorsements. So you can read those on your own if you would like further information. So the Trinity Health trainers, we had put out an RFP last year and we got four providers that responded back to us. 2 of the 4 right now are unable to provide the athletic trainers. They do not have the personnel. A third one was only a per diem basis, which means that they send a different trainer each time that we are needed. They only cover games due to their availability, and they are $60 per hour per diem. So it helps us in a pinch when we don't have enough athletic trainers to go around to cover all of our games, but it doesn't fill the model that we are looking for to give our student athletes the overall help that we'd like to give them. So it is a $30,000 fee per trainer, but we get them for up to 25 hours a week year round. And we are working on getting the same athletic trainer. Right now, Trinity is able to give us 3. They are working on getting additional throughout this year and completing next year, which the RFP ends at the end of next school year. We worked with them last year. We had a trainer come on board in January, and he has done a phenomenal job. He's built out a great rapport with the student athlete coaches and administrators and parents at Hartford High. He also helped fill in at the other schools to help cover games or when we needed them. But again, we weren't able to give the same quality of care across the district to all of our student athletes because we weren't able to have the same trainer working with our students. They are also evaluated by the school athletic directors and the provider supervisors to ensure that the quality of care that is expected is being provided. And being around all the games in schools, I got to tell you that the personnel that they do put on board are phenomenal, and they go above and beyond any expectations that we have for them. Right, next slide.
That's the end.
All right, that's the end, and I can answer any other specific questions that you may have.
Are there any questions from our board members? Not seeing any questions. I appreciate this presentation and thank you for the work that you're doing on this. I think this is important. I think this is like a very good step to getting some consistency. As someone who loves, Hartford, school sports, right? Like I think this is important and it brings another level. Are there any questions around the budget or the funding of this? Can you give me more insight on the athletic directors in the organization that they're coming from? Is this related to Trinity Health, or
Yes.
is this okay?
Yeah,
Like,
so Trinity Health is what we're looking for is because of all of the licensure and the liability behind it. We like to use a provider to provide our athletic trainers so that they oversee, all of the legal aspects of what needs to be done. Trying to, scale that down to just one provider is our ultimate goal. That way, they all work together with each other. They help cover each other. And Trinity Health is obviously the best funding source for us, and they've also been a great provider for us. Like I said, we've been using the doctors from St. Francis, which is a partnership with Trinity Health for the last, since I've been here, so almost 20 years. They've been coming on the Tuesdays. So the relationship between the athletic trainer and the doctor also is a benefit because they're able to get our student athletes in to get MRIs. They're able to get in to help them take care of serious injuries that are going on. When we use a lot of the different facilities, different providers that come in, it's a little bit more costly, and we don't get that same consistency with the athletic trainers working with our athletes. I hope that answered your question.
yeah, no, it answers it. Okay, any other questions regarding this? Kim, Shantae, Yvette, Francois?
No,
Okay.
no questions at this time. Just
All
thankful
right,
for the
outstanding.
presentation.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Thank you, Heidi. And as I stated before, will you please give me a list of any game that is going on? I want to be there. I want to sit with you. I want to see it and
I
understand
need
it from
your
your
email
perspective.
address. I tried emailing you, but I don't think I had the right email address because I didn't get a response.
Okay, yeah, that's probably my board email address. So
Yeah. It was the one,
I will send
so I
it to
could send you the information that you were asking for.
Okay.
This is Francoise. Sorry for speaking out of turn. I just put my email address in the chat. So if you can please email me on any upcoming games or events, and I would like to attend as well.
Okay, so what I'll do is I can send you guys the link because we have so many schools between high school and middle school. I can send you the link and I'll give you the direct on how you can look at, and you can look at any school that you want, and it'll show you the monthly schedule for what games they're being offered and home and away and their sites.
Okay, great.
All right. Yeah, and I'm going to get these email addresses. And thank you guys. I really appreciate your support with the athletic trainers. I know it seems like, it's like, oh my gosh, they all need them, but absolutely, because every single day, each of the 8 schools are having athletics going on, and we want to keep our student athletes safe. So again, thank you very, very much.
Appreciate you. All right. Christina going?
I think Sherry got taken over as the host.
Okay. Sherry, any other business we need to listen to or be You're on mute.
I am so sorry. I was multitasking, so I didn't realize I became the host. Was that the last contract on the agenda? I believe so.
Okay, well, if that is it, well, I ain't gonna argue with you. If there's anything else, I'm sure folks will round this back up. I want to thank everyone for their time. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you to all the board members on the line. I will. I don't think I'll be at the meeting next week, but I'm sure you all will make the right decisions. All right. Look forward to seeing you all soon.
Have a good rest of the day.
You too. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.